So the new and updated rules for Emperor's Children are out and available to download digitally. There's no denying that they're pretty awful right now, but maybe speak of things to come. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Chaos Space Marines and Emperor's Children once more, where in this video I thought we'd do a full rules review of Index Emperor's Children, the stopgap rule set to allow you to field Noise Marines and Lucius the Eternal with Codex Chaos Space Marines, while Games Workshop no doubt cook up an Emperor's Children Codex for later in the edition with the return of Fulgrim. This was one of the downloads that I was expecting to drop this week. Given Games Workshop's previous hints, it made sense that it would go live prior to the full official release of Codex Chaos Space Marines, and that should be this weekend. Previously in Codex Chaos Space Marines, they had two datasheets mainly aimed at Emperor's Children, Lucius the Eternal, the pleasant duelist chap with the armor of Shrieking Souls, where if you kill him, then you slowly morph into him, and the Noise Marines, everyone's favourite sonic weapon Space Marines. They let us know well ahead of time that these two units would be removed from the core codex and would have rule support in a stopgap index outside of the codex, and that does seem to have been exactly what's happened. I did see a few people speculating whether or not Fabius Bile might also go into the same index, though I personally thought it was very unlikely. While he might have had his heritage from the Emperor's Children, he doesn't really maintain ties with them right now, and is more of an unaligned mad scientist of chaos rather than true Emperor's Children. And as expected, he remains in core Chaos Space Marines when Lucius and the Noise Marines have been moved to this Index Emperor's Children. The motivation for this one is really quite transparent. It's almost certainly due to a Codex release for Emperor's Children in a similar sort of vein to World Eaters. This one seems to be playing out exactly as the World Eaters did for 9th edition. When Codex Chaos Space Marines came out for 9th edition, Khorne Berserkers and Khan the Betrayer got moved out of the Codex and had their rule support go into a White Dwarf index, the reason being so they weren't partially invalidating Codex Chaos Space Marines when the World Eaters launch came out. Though unlike the World Eaters, they've been a little bit more shy about announcing the release of an Emperor's Children Codex, though just given the past precedent, it seems almost certain that it's going to be later in 10th edition, similar to the World Eaters. In 9th, they hit us with not one but two new factions added to the game in World Eaters and Leagues of Votann really quite late in the whole edition release cycle, and seems kind of likely that Emperor's Children might fill one of those type slots. Adding new factions to the game in the sort of late stages actually seems like a pretty sensible move to do so on Games Workshop, as that means that less codexes are going to be waiting for their release right up to the last second. So that can be a big exciting release to draw some attention in the otherwise sort of quiet time when there might not be many other codex releases coming out. As a result, the index that we've got today is basically a bit of a stopgap type index. I honestly really wasn't expecting much from this one, and indeed there hasn't been much. This is literally just a rule set to do the absolute bare minimum to keep these units playable. Games Workshop not really intending to add much interest to them right now until they actually have the full codex come out, and no doubt get a whole bunch of fun stuff with some awesome new models, detachments and things like that. That brings us to the actual contents of the digital index, and I felt like the biggest question as to what they might or might not do would be whether they'd give them a token detachment to go forward, much in the same way that we've got sort of themed detachments for, say, the Night Lords or the Iron Warriors in Codex Chaos Space Marines, or whether they just literally have the unit profiles added in. It does seem that it's pretty much unit profiles and rules for fielding the army, and sadly we don't get a themed Emperor's Children Chaos Space Marine detachment in the index to tide them over until the codex comes out. From initial reactions, it looks like people are a bit disappointed by that, though I think it was kind of expected really. Maybe it's just the fact that they called it index set people's expectations a bit high, maybe thinking that it would be like the indexes that came out at the start of 10th edition, where instead it's really just the rules for keeping two datasheets functional while they're not printed in the codex. In the download we get the core rules and ones for Lucius the Eternal and the Noise Marines. Jumping into it though, let's take a look at what we've got. The core rule is the Chosen of Slanesh, and this goes alongside the Dark Pacts that you get from Codex Chaos Space Marines, and there's just a little section saying to reference Codex Chaos Marines for that bit. Broadly speaking, I feel like the rules function about as close as possible as they could before, maybe just a bit more wordy given more detachments on offer for Chaos Space Marines than there were previously, and some wording updates to mean that it will still work fine in the interim to set it up so Codex Emperor's Children works well with Codex Space Marines without any additional support when both books are out. The main actual change is maybe a bit of a theoretical one. They've made Emperor's Children as an actual faction keyword rather than Heretic Astartes. Though currently to actually field them, you need to use the rule set with the Chosen of Slaanesh, and you wind up just replacing it back to Heretic Astartes if you actually want to use them in-game currently. Again, it's kind of confirmation that the Codex is coming really, as then that can reference the rule section in Codex Chaos Space Marines, and then when they say replace the Emperor's Children keyword, that can equally be from the Codex, as well as just this temporary index. The faction keyword is relevant for adding allied noise marines. There's a rule section in Codex Chaos Marines for adding up to a quarter of your points in cult space marines from the other codexes and now indexes, I guess. So you could have, say, 500 points worth of noise marines just via the faction keyword. But otherwise, if you want to field an Emperor's Children army outright, the way that you do that is to have Lucius the Eternal as your warlord. If you do so, then you replace Emperor's Children on the keywords with Heretic Astartes, so you can field him, the Noise Marines, and everything from Codex Chaos Space Marines as normal units without having to worry about that whole Cult Marine style restriction. And then basically the rules for everything else is that it operates as per Codex Chaos Space Marines, but where there's any choice you're only locked to Slaanesh things. You still get Dark Pacts as they're written in the core Codex, and you can make use of literally any of the detachments, or the ones that are slightly themed to other legions, but if you're using that Pack-Bound Zealots one, you can only use the Slaanesh mark, so that one's arguably nerfed compared with the rest for the Emperor's Children, because you don't have the flexibility to choose other things. As well as that, Demon Princes must be marked as Slaanesh and not choose the other marks, which I think isn't the biggest loss in the world really. The extra movement is handy enough, and you can't use anything that's got Khorne, Tzeentch or Nurgle units in your army, so no access to the Khorne Lord of Skulls for example. Though it seems that you can include Chaos Undivided things like Abaddon the Despoiler, who no longer has those keywords. And then in the Demon Allies section, there's rules that say that you can only take Slaanesh units alongside Emperor's Children fielded this way. So no taking things like, say, Allied Nurglings, which is a disadvantage compared with some of the others, as they're kind of great for interference units. Overall, basically, these core rules are more about restrictions than they are about benefits, even if a lot of them make sense, really, as a legion that's all about Slaanesh. It does mean, though, that in terms of Emperor's Children being anywhere near strong, the only real advantages here are being able to field Lucius the Eternal himself, who in turn allows battle line noise marines as he is the warlord. So basically the advantage of putting up with those restrictions is being able to play Lucius's own datasheets and a lot of noise marines if that's actually something that's worth doing. I guess in theory, if they made the points so that both units were genuinely quite good and that was actually tempting enough to add a fair bit of strength to the army, then it could be interesting. I think it is maybe a little bit of a shame that it didn't add something perhaps a little bit more than this. You could have other interesting things go off across the army as a reward for Lucius being the warlord perhaps, but I guess their main aim is probably to save fun stuff like that for an actual Codex release, when the Emperor's Children come out in full and they actually get detachments and everything. Looking at the datasheets themselves, first up we have Lucius the Eternal. His pre-Codex points were 95 points, and I guess we'll see whether that shifts either up or down when the digital points drop for the Codex, which we're still waiting for. He's just had two very minor changes, as mentioned, the faction keyword being swapped to Emperor's Children, though if you're fielding him now, then you swap it right back, and a small change to his Armor of Shrieking Souls ability. It means that there's not a stipulation for him to set back up leading the unit if he is lucky enough to get revived by that, though I guess that would usually only matter if he was killed by a precision attack. Then he was lucky enough to destroy the precision attack unit with his mortal wound attack, as per that ability. Seems so niche that it would very rarely come up, so it's not like that one really matters that much. In any case, I feel like he's an interesting enough character to field, a sort of standard Chaos Lord kind of profile with 5 wounds and an invulnerable save. He comes with a Doom Siren shooting attack, which is essentially a heavy flamer with +1 strength, and then a whole load of Space Marine killing style attacks with the Duelist Sword and Lash of Torment. That's 8 attacks at Strength 5, AP 2 and Damage 2, all with precision, and he also gives Fights First to his units, which can make him a bit more indomitable to charge. Overall seems like it's alright for 95 points, fairly good melee, precision and a hard target for the enemy to charge against him, though you'd have to weigh it up against things like free stratagems for Chaos Lords and the sheer amount of damage that they can do in the turn where they go into rage mode. Otherwise, that Armor of Shrieking Souls rule is kind of fun, though a bit maybe in your opponent's control as to whether they trigger it. When he's slain, the enemy takes D3 mortal wounds or D6 mortal wounds instead if they fail a leadership test. If those wounds taken destroy the entire enemy unit, you get to resurrect Lucius on D3 wounds remaining, as the Armor of Shrieking Souls reforms itself around whoever was unlucky enough to kill the guy. I'd say it's maybe a slightly more fun and flavourful rule versus massively impactful. A lot of the time it'll just be D3 wounds against a unit and then nothing more, but certainly pretty awesome imagery if it does ever wind up reviving him. Otherwise, we've got the Noise Marines, who pre-Codex were 85 points for 5 or 170 per 10. It doesn't really look like they've been changed at all besides the Emperor's Children faction keyword they gained. They're still basically kind of Chaos Space Marine Legionary stat lines, but with Objective Control 1. The main excitement for the unit is getting a whole bunch of fun sonic weapons. The champion can get a Doom Siren like Lucius, one squad member can get a pretty punchy Blastmaster with Strength 9 and Damage 3, and the rest can either trade out their bolters for either Sonic Blasters, which are 3 shots at Strength 5 AP 0 with Assault, or potentially Astartes Chainswords if you want to skew the squad a bit more to melee. They also get a Chaos Icon and a Battle Shock debuff for 1 unit shot by the unit, which is a bit borderline in the enemy turn most of the time. I feel like at 85 points they're usable enough, though I think they're competing hard with Legionaries if they do wind up still being 80 points after the digital points update. The Legionaries getting inbuilt rerolls, a second Power Fist equivalent, and Objective Control 2, as well as a heavy weapon, is all a lot of things for the Noise Marines to compete against. I feel like if they're going to be seen as particularly strong, they'll probably have to at least cost the same as Legionaries. Though I guess it is kind of fun to have a troop's choice a bit more focused on range damage, a bit more so than melee. I guess at least they can use Dark Packs to amp up their damage, which things like the Plague Marines, Rubric Marines, and Khorne Berserkers can't do, as they don't have that on their datasheets. Overall, as expected, it's not really the most exciting little index in the world. It's literally just there to keep the units playable until an Emperor's Children Codex does come out. I'd be kind of surprised if anyone's making too much use of it in terms of competitive play, unless Lucius and the Noise Marines get very cheap indeed. I feel like it's the thing that, at least on paper though, it wouldn't actually take too much strength away from the army to field them as that. At least if you're using a detachment where you didn't want to use anything that didn't have Slaanesh keywords already, just getting bigger access to Noise Marines and Lucius the Eternal seems like it's fine enough if it wasn't compromising anything else. I think it's definitely intriguing for the future though. It'll be really cool to see what a Codex for Emperor's Children brings. It seems that at the very least we'd get new Fulgrim similar to the Horus Heresy model, and new Noise Marines and new Lucius the Eternal. Then beyond that, based on Death Guard, Thousand Sons and World Eaters, probably new Terminators, raised cultists of some sort, probably some more Lords and supporting characters, maybe things like Demon Engines, a Possessed alternative, or a unique Dreadnought or Hellbrute could all be nice. I feel like a 40k Sonic Dreadnought would go down very well with Emperor's Children collectors. It'll be fun to see what comes for them though. With the index, at least Games Workshop has set the stage for something else interesting to come. I guess we'll wait for later in 10th edition to see what they have in store. In any case, let me know what you make of the Little Emperor's Children Index. Look forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments below, as per always. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I do tend to post new 40k videos just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support and keep these videos coming. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.